Warning, the following material is extremely disturbing. On Grave Matter, we try to be as accurate as possible and we collect information from many different sources. We don't condone or glorify murder, and we try to be as sensitive as possible to victims and their families while approaching a serious subject matter with a sense of humor. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our second episode of Grave Matter.
It will be better than last episode, and hopefully next episode will be better than this episode.
We're growing. We're a growing organism.
Still got our liquid courage, but we'll be able to wean ourselves off, I think. Maybe.
They don't need to know that.
They'll hear your ice rattling in your cup.
I don't know. I don't think anyone can hear that.
No? I can hear it going down your throat.
Anyways, on tonight's episode of Grave Matter, we are going to talk about a story of unfathomable tragedy in Southeast Texas that has changed the lives of the residents not only for years and years, but decades and decades. And the majority of it remains unsolved, or at least a lot of it does. So this is not a normal case of a serial killer. This is a case of several serial killers, possibly a network that is unknown. Several communities are involved. And it's been described as the perfect place for killing someone and getting away with it. And once again, it's right here in our backyard in Texas. And then, Jill, you're going to talk about something a little bit different, right? What are you going to talk about today?
I'm going to talk about Robert Ben Rhoades. He is the truck stop killer. And I wouldn't be surprised to find out if he was responsible for some of these deaths that have occurred in the killing fields of Texas. Mm-hmm. He fits the bill. He has a similar MO to how some of these people died out here.
Right.
And the type of victim he targeted.
And I'm excited because I don't know much about this dude at all. So I'm actually pretty excited to learn about that because I've done more extensive research into the actual killing fields phenomenon and worked my way outward from that. But focusing in on an individual like this that could match and fit the description is pretty cool. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well, right?
Yeah, there was so much information on this guy. I did my best to piece together. I mean, certain victims had different names in certain articles, and you know.
For like safety reasons or whatever.
Well, I think it was just mistakes. You know, you come across 30 articles, and they're not going to be exactly the same. They have, So I tried my best to research this and get as accurate information as I could.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty interesting story about a piece of shit serial killer.
Well, I'm excited to hear about it. Let's start off. Let's talk a little bit about the location of where this took place, and we'll go into the background a little bit, kind of an overview here. So, the episode is, at least the first half, is dedicated to the killing fields, which is what they've kind of named this place. And the actual killing fields is one field. It's a 25-acre field. And it's kind of like a patch of land adjacent to Calder Road, which is just south of League City, Texas. So this is between Houston and Galveston. There's just this stretch of 45 that we're going to be talking about all night. But specifically, the killing field is one location within that, and that is in South League City at 45 and Calder Road. So there's actually only been 4 bodies found in that field, but as far as related killings, there's possibly, I mean, I've seen so many different numbers. I think the highest number I've seen is 200 in the area. The movie talks about 60 bodies being found. There were only 4 in the field, and then I think the number that I see most of the time is 30 to 33.
Yeah, usually somewhere right close to 40. 37, 38 is what I've seen most.
Wikipedia has 45 that are listed, but there's a couple in there that I can already tell you. Like there's a, Tot Harrietman. I don't remember the exact name, but it was a lady that was like 57 years old that like went missing and was never found. You know, there's that. I don't think that's related. So
What overwhelmed me was the amount of 12 and 13-year-old victims that were found. That was a pretty common age for the bodies they've discovered out there.
It was, right. So, and something I'm going to talk about when we move on to talking about the victims a little bit more is some of the similarities between certain groups of them. And that's kind of led me to have my own theories on what happened or who was involved. So, as far as the location, yeah, it's in southeast Houston, Texas, I-45 corridor between Houston and Galveston. Keep in mind, Houston is a city now of 2.5 million people, and the area of Houston that we're talking about, the southeast, is completely industrial. Right? There's, from what I've seen, very few neighborhoods. It's all oil, chemicals, gas, like these huge refineries, miles and miles of piping and flaming towers, and it's like smoggy, and it's swampy, and it's a marshland, and it's hot, and it's like it's its own world. It's like an alien world over there. You know what I mean? It's not like a neighborhood, your friendly old neighborhood. You know what I mean? It's like giant Exxon concrete structures with graffiti all over it and stuff. It's pretty weird.
Fish with legs, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Or
seems like a nice place to raise a family.
Oceans with oil. I know, right? So, and then you add in all these killings, and it's absolutely insane. So, just want to paint a picture of what the location is actually like. And if you get on YouTube or you get on Google or whatever, you can see, the movie does a good job, too, of kind of painting the picture of what it looked like. I think they actually filmed it in the area, so.
It's a boil on the butt of humanity.
I would absolutely agree. Another reason the location is important in this episode of the killing fields is because of all of the transient workers in the area, right? You keep hearing that if you watch documentaries or whatever. Transient workers. Which is is there what's the definition of a transient worker? I guess somebody who just travels for work in the area, right?
Somebody didn't have roots.
Yeah, and I don't think it's only that there, but everyone that works there, most of the people don't live there. You know what I mean? They at least live in the city.
Why? It sounds lovely.
It's absolutely gorgeous.
It's also really close to the highway, so you've got people driving down the highway, you've got truckers, and you've got just people who don't belong there coming through, and
yep,
no ties to that area, so they
constantly, and it's thousands and thousands of people that work there. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and it's very easy to get jobs with different companies in the area. People move to Louisiana for work all the time. They go out in the Gulf, so it's pretty much the perfect spot to get away with it. Let's talk a little bit about the victims. I have a pretty comprehensive list of them here, but the very first victim, and this is, not all of this has been solved, so it's kind of hearsay, but the first victim that I think everyone has kind of agreed to say it started with this was Colette Wilson. This was in June of 1971, June 17th. And she was only 13 years old. So back to what you were saying, this is the very first case of this happening. She was only 13 years old. She was dropped off by her band director, and she was found 5 months later in the Addicks Reservoir, which they found a few more bodies there. So that became important later on. So that's the first time it happened, right? Okay. June of 1971. And it was totally unexpected, but
it would have been easy, I think, back then, that people didn't really have too many problems with their kids walking to and from school, and
That's our dog in the background, by the way.
Yeah.
His name's Frog, and he's just checking us out. I know you guys hear that, like, what?
But it probably would have been pretty easy pickings for somebody who was out looking for a victim.
I think it would, right? Especially back then, it's that much less populated, and no one cares, no one goes there. So anyways, Colette Wilson, June of 1971. The next incident was only 2 weeks later, on July 1st. And that was a 14-year-old named Brenda Jones. Her body was found in a different place. It was found in Galveston Bay, but it was so close, and only 2 weeks apart, that they feel it had to be related, right? And then you started seeing pairs of girls being abducted. So, the next few victims, there were 3 pairs, so 6 girls that got abducted. There was also very young. So Sharon Shaw and Rhonda Johnson, both 14 years old. And they were taken August 4th of 1971. So this was a month and a couple days later. fast forward a couple months, and you're in October, almost Halloween, October 28th. You actually have a 19-year-old, Gloria Gonzalez. I wasn't sure if it was related, but she was found in the Addicks Reservoir right next to Colette Wilson.
Addicks.
It's like Addicks, Addicks Reservoir.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, this was just an area over there, right off of 45 as well. So potentially unrelated at the time, so they thought. But then when she was discovered, it was right next to Colette Wilson, the first victim. Following that, you had a 12-year-old taken by herself. This was Allison Craven. This was in November of 71, but I'm not sure that this was related. Now, I'm going over the first 12 victims right now because I call these the 1970s victims. If you look at what I'm saying right now with the dates, this is all very aggressive. It happened very fast. It started, and then 2 weeks later, another one. 2 weeks later, another one. A month, another one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you'll see that trend change as we move into the 1980s. But anyways, after Allison Craven, she was found in Pearland, so 10 miles away from her home, and this was kind of a different MO from what it seemed like. You know, she was taken from an apartment building, not a payphone at a gas station like most of these other girls. And one of the guys that confessed from prison that we'll talk about later admitted to killing 11 girls, and I'm going through the first 12, and this one already seemed kind of out of place to me. And so I think that, I don't know, maybe I'm right. Maybe this is the one he didn't kill out of the 11, or maybe he just can't count and he killed all of them. I don't know. I feel like he would remember, you know, I feel like a serial killer would know exactly what he did. But post Allison Craven, we're back in November. This is November 15th of 1971, 2 weeks after the Gloria Gonzalez incident right before Halloween. 2 other girls are taken, Maria Johnson and Debbie Ackerman, both of which are 15 years old. And the way that they died was pretty horrendous. They were found in a bayou, partially clothed and tied up. So what he did is he drove them there. They were alive. He had them stand in the water tied up, and he shot them in the water. So their bodies were discovered later. Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's a pretty bad one. And also Kimberly Pitchford, who was 16 years old, was killed as well. And that was on January 3rd of 1973. So this is actually 2 years after the 71 killings, but the same guy admitted to killing her as well. He was like, I remember her specifically. So
What is the MO or the cause of death for the first few? You said that those 2 were shot.
Mm-hmm. There were various ways that some of them were killed. They weren't sure on some of the cases because they weren't found until like
They'd already decomposed.
17 months later or something like that, right? There was one of them looked to have been beaten to death and then tossed. Another few were shot. It seemed to be most of them were shot and beaten. All of them were pretty much raped and had lacerations. So a couple differences, which leads me to a couple different theories that we'll talk about a little bit later. But most of them were sexually abused in some way, shape, or form, raped, and had lacerations, strangle marks. They were strangled, but you know, a lot of it was too late to tell sometimes. So some inconsistencies, but I still think that they're related. I really do. And then there's just 3 more with the 1970s killings. 2 of them, once again, a pair of girls, right? 14 and 12 years old, were skipping middle school. This is Georgia Gear, or Gear, I don't know really how to say it, Georgia Gear, and Brooks Bracewell. And it took them a long time to be found. Actually, they weren't found until 1981 because the police kind of messed up and they failed to identify the victims. They found them but failed to identify them. So eventually found out it was them. And then in May of 77, 3 years later, there's another girl, Suzanne Bowers, who's 12 years old at the time. She was found in Alta Loma, where some of the first victims had lived. So that kind of ends the 70s right there, 77. The next time something happened was in 1983. But even those 12 right there, that's kind of, I think, what initially sparked the whole controversy about not the killing fields, but the I-45 corridor and the highway of hell, as they call it, right? All right, so I know that was a long list of victims there, but I did want to go over the ones of the 1971 killings and then kind of talk a little bit about this guy that came out, right? His name is Edward Harold Bell. He's a suspect, right? And this guy basically confessed to several of these 12 murders within that time frame in the 1970s, right? He was already in prison for a kidnapping charge. He got 70 years, and he was already like 65 years old, so, he was done. He was in there for life, and while he was in there, I think it was 1998, he wrote a letter, I think it was to the Galveston DA, or someone in the Galveston County, and claimed to have killed all these girls. Between 1966 and 1978, this dude was arrested like super a lot. Super a lot. Let's fucking change that. During 1966 and 1978, this guy was arrested several times, and it was all for like flashing girls and masturbating in public. And he would like show up and hop out of his truck with like cowboy boots on and be like, "Yeehaw, motherfucker!" Just start jacking off in front of like groups of teen cheerleaders and shit. And he was arrested all the time for this type of shit, right?
Nasty.
Yep, nasty. Anyways, fast forward. And one time he jumps out. It's a group of like 5 cheerleaders. Same thing. Jumps out of his truck in his cowboy boots, starts masturbating, and a guy catches him. And he's a Marine.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So he pulls out his fucking gun and he kills the Marine. He murders a dude in front of all these people, and he flees in 1978, right? He killed a Marine on August 24th, 1978. He was 62 years old, and he got caught 14 years later. He dipped out of town, went down to Mexico, down to South America, and was a sailing instructor on a freaking sailboat. And eventually got caught by the Panamanian police after a TV show did a special on him, right? Which is, like, of that crime, and he got caught.
Wow.
Yep. Anyways, so he was doing, it wasn't a kidnapping charge. That's why eventually he got caught up with that. So he was doing time for that, and then he wrote a letter in 1998 saying that he had committed all these murders. He claimed to have killed the very first one, Colette Wilson. He claimed to have killed all of the pairs of girls, the 3 pairs, the 6 girls that were taken together. He claimed to have killed Pitchford, that 16-year-old, and he said that he had a lot of stuff to say and a lot of info that he would give to reporters and police if he could get immunity. He's like, there's so much more I could tell you, but they never offered him immunity, so he was like, all right, I'm not saying anything. He said he was compelled to do evil, but he didn't know why. He had a 1971 white Ford van, which matched the vehicle description of a lot of these killings, right? Was last seen in a white van. Right?
Oh, yeah, that's not suspicious or,
right. And he had repainted it, by the way, which, yeah.
Did it say free candy on the door?
I think it might have. I mean, I don't know. Whatever he did, it worked, that's for sure. He was a smart guy. He was a college graduate from A&M. He had 3 kids. He was a pharmaceutical sales rep. The dude had a career going for him, and then eventually he said he was compelled to do evil and start killing the girls that he was flashing and stuff. So it makes sense to me because he left in 1978, and really Suzanne Bowers in 1977 was the last seemingly related incident, So he says he doesn't remember all the girls' names, but it does make sense to me that he would be telling the truth. Naturally, the police looked into it as he confessed, and they said that they did not have enough evidence to prosecute him, even though he had confessed. So he was already in prison, and nobody will ever know. I'm not sure if he's still alive or not, but I guess nobody knows the truth as to whether or not he did this personally. Yeah, I think so. I think very much so. He would be 45 to 55 years old during the height of this. So,
what was his name?
Edward Harold Bell. So moving on into the 80s. So, yeah, like I said, Bell leaves town. He gets caught 14 years later, and the murders stop in the 70s as soon as he leaves. Do I think that was him? Yeah, he admitted to doing it. Do I think it was him? Yeah, absolutely I do. We fast forward to the 1980s, and our first incident is in October of 1983 with Heidi Villarreal Fye and Sandra Ramber of Santa Fe, Texas. So Heidi was actually 23. She was a bit older than these other people, although Sandra was only 14. One was on October 10th, and the other was October 26th. The next one was Laura Miller, who was 16 years old, and that was September 10th. So it looks like it's starting up again, right? This is a new trend. There's a significant gap, and then something starts again. So talking about the 80s killers here, there are 4 girls, Heidi Fye, Laura Miller, and then 2 unidentified girls, Jane Doe and Janet Doe, all of which were found in the actual killing field, 3000 block of Calder Road, right? This was all in the 80s, 1983 and 1984. for Heidi Fye and Laura Miller, and then Jane and Janet Doe were found in 1986, but they didn't know when they were put there in the first place. I imagine it's around the same time frame, you know. Laura Miller is a very interesting story because of her father. So Laura Miller's father became literally obsessed, and still to this day is not, I don't want to say he's not right in the head. Nobody would be after going through that, you know what I mean? But he's still like, well, I just have to convince myself that she never experienced any pain, and if that's crazy, then I guess I'm crazy, but that's what I got to tell myself. And you can tell he's just a man that's in so much pain, you know?
Right.
Eventually, there was a suspect that came to light for these killings that took place in the field itself in the 1980s. And it actually kind of gathered a lot of attention. This dude's name was Robert Abel. And Robert Abel owned land adjacent to the killing fields. He was older at the time. I think he was in his 60s, but he had been an engineer for NASA. He was like a super brilliant guy. And his whole thing was getting the Saturn V rocket into outer space and also calculating trajectories for the moon, right?
That's kind of like a pattern you see a lot of times with serial killers. They're either brilliant or they have like the IQ of a potato.
Right. No, totally. And the FBI profile of this guy, or of these killings, said that the killer was probably highly intelligent and blended into society somehow. Also, this guy had horses, right? That's why he had this land. His whole thing was, it was, I think, Stardust horseback rides or something, right? And that was his whole, that's what he wanted to do. And I actually read a figure that in 1991, he had actually grossed $250,000 from that business. It was doing really well until all of this happened and destroyed him completely, right? So he's a very interesting case. Laura Miller's father started stalking this guy when he came to light because there were some interesting facts about this guy. He had been accused of beating his horses, like violently beating his horses, like to make them submit, as well as he had a marriage that only lasted 41 days, and they were like, what's up with that? And he never talked about it. And the wife said that she wasn't in the mood to have sex with him. And he was like, if you ever refuse sex to me again, I'll kill you. Straight. So
super.
Naturally, this guy came to light as a prime suspect, and he owned the property adjacent to the killing fields, right? So
he had opportunity for sure.
For sure. The only problem is they searched his house, they searched his land. I think he took a polygraph sometime in the future. Past that, he had literally no shred of to this day, no shred of evidence ever exists against this guy, right?
Just a gut feeling.
Just a gut feeling. And the dad eventually overcame that and apologized to him for destroying his life after he realized that it probably was not him. And it was too late. That guy's life had been absolutely destroyed. He wound up driving a golf cart onto train tracks and killing himself. And I think, Mr. Miller feels some type of way about being responsible for that. But it's weird because the golf cart accident, I say that intently because it was ruled an accident and not a suicide, which I think is, I don't know how you would, accidentally parked on the train tracks and stayed as there was a train coming and stayed.
Can't leave this golf cart.
I don't have to... Let me out! Unlock it! Unlock it! Can you imagine?
The airbags will save me. It'll be okay.
So, I don't think it was an accident at all. I think that guy's life was absolutely destroyed. There was one point where a girl went missing and 200 people showed up on his property without his permission and combed the whole area. And boys were driving by going, "You're the killer!" Yelling stuff at him. And he was absolutely destroyed. His business failed. And that was a chicken. We have chickens.
It was a rooster.
I apologize. I'm not the farmer here.
Get your poultry terminology on point.
Meat bird. We're the meat birds. Thank you for joining us, Cleveland.
That was a yard bird.
So, with the 1980s killings... You guys done? I can't even talk now. So, with the 1980s killings... He's like,
this is not a city podcast.
Definitely not. Yeah, well, it's either gunshots or sirens or dogs and chickens and roosters. So with the 1980s killers, and I'm just going to keep going this time no matter what. the actual killer has never been found, I believe. Never been proven, right? So we do fast forward to the 90s, the 1990s, right? MTV. Let's get it. And we look at a couple more of the killings. Specifically, we're going to look at Jessica Kane, Laura Smither, and Tiffany Johnston, as well as Kelly Cox. But the ages vary, but this was in 1997, right? So we have 12-year-old Laura Smither, 17-year-old Jessica Kane, 19-year-old Tiffany Johnston, and Kelly Cox, who was 20 years old. These girls were found, and then nothing happened for a very long time. I think it was 17 years. It remained unsolved. Eventually, they decided to do a DNA test on one of the dresses because the technology didn't exist at the time, right? So I think it was in 1997 they ran a DNA test on her dress of, I think it was Jessica Kane. And there was a match with a gentleman who had been arrested on a drug charge in Louisiana. And it was 58-year-old William Lewis Reese. So it took the jury 30 minutes to decide he was guilty. And basically led them to the bodies of Jessica Kane and Kelly Cox, who the murder he was not charged with because there wasn't enough evidence, but they were together, so it's pretty obvious that he was responsible for it.
So that's the story of the Texas killing fields?
So that's the story of the majority of the Texas killing fields. You have the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. At least 3 different killers. I think Edward Harold Bell is responsible for the ones in the 70s. I'm not sure who is responsible for the ones in the 80s. That's the biggest mystery. That's the actual murders in the killing field. These girls were placed under trees with their arms crossed every single time. It's obviously the same person, but the killer of the in the field was never found. Yeah.
So he posed the bodies after.
He posed the bodies. Absolutely.
That's a very interesting detail to me.
There was one thing I read that said that the bodies were placed almost so that it was like a pathway to the killer's trophies, that he could walk through there and be like, here's this body, here's this body, here's this body. And it's just a beautiful pathway through his life of destruction.
Wow.
Yeah. Through his to view his trophies was how I read it. So
what's the most recent killing? Those that in the 90s?
Yeah, so the 90s, I mean, if you talk about it,
anyway.
I mean, that seems to be related. Yeah. 97. But there's still girls going missing.
It's a large place.
It is. It's a very large place, and it's kind of hard to draw. Where do you draw the boundary at? You know what I mean? Like, there's so many girls that go missing in Southeast Texas or in Pasadena, but it's not exactly the same area. It doesn't seem to be related. So
That'd be interesting.
there's hundreds of missing girls recently that have gone, missing in that area. So, but not bodies showing up. Not yet.
I'd be interested in just seeing them take out cadaver dogs to try to find.
They have.
That's so crazy to me.
That's one of the things about Robert Abel. When his life was destroyed, they brought cadaver dogs onto his property. They never found anything. He was like, I didn't kill those girls, I swear. I've done some, I think he did some messed up shit, but he didn't have the social capacity to be like, look, I fucked up, but I didn't kill anybody. He was just trying to hide everything,
Right.
And that made him more of a suspect. Ultimately, I think that the 4 bodies that were found in the killing field remains unsolved. And I mean, maybe that'll lead us into kind of what we're going to talk about next with some of your theories here.
Yeah, perhaps.
Oh, real quick. One thing I wanted to touch on. There was a film made. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, it's a bit different than I would expected, because I'm, doing this intense research on the fields, and I feel like the film was a
Drama.
Well, no, it's not that. It's just that the film focused on one girl, and it was somebody that was abducted and then they got back safely, and it didn't really dive into everything that is the Texas killing fields. It kind of scraped the surface, but they said really the mission was to bring awareness to the incident. And the cast is really amazing. The cast, it has Sam Worthington, which is Jake Sully, the main character from Avatar, the Marine guy with the legs that don't work, like Lieutenant Dan. And it also has Jeffrey Dean Morgan of Grey's Anatomy and Supernatural. So Those are the two main characters.
I remember him. He was like the gruff cop that kind of overlooked. What was her name? Chloe Grace Moretz. Is that the actress?
For the girl? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. I've seen her in 100 things, I swear, but I just don't remember what it is. But yeah, she does a good job. And it was a good movie, and I think it does a good job of bringing light to the situation. So, and it really does a great job of painting the picture of the location and kind of the vibe that went along.
Yeah, that place is just crap anyway.
It is.
It's just spooky and
it's back then in the 1970s, you didn't really have interdepartmental communication. So they're like, well, we're in Texas City. Oh, well, we found them in League City. Sorry about that. And it's, for example, I think it was Crystal Jean Baker. And I can't even do this podcast without mentioning Crystal Jean Baker. Crystal Jean Baker. Is it Jean Baker? It's Crystal Baker. I don't know. But her great aunt is Norma Jean Baker on her dad's side, a.k.a. Marilyn Monroe. Right? So, pretty interesting. She was 13 and she was taken from Texas City. She was actually found 2 hours later after she disappeared, but in a different county, the adjacent county. And she sat there as a Jane Doe for weeks until someone figured out to pick up a phone, I guess. I don't know, So it wasn't a very strong police work back then. There were several of these girls where their parents would call and say, yep, she ran away. She was having a fight with her grandma. She ran away. And they never did anything.
Huh.
There's a lot of talk about the investigations being not like tampered with, just really bad police work, No one really cared. There were pieces of clothing that had like semen on it and so, that were lost. They just threw them away or they don't know,
Yeah.
So
there's also several other killing fields in the country. I think there's at least 5. I know there's one in Louisiana. I watched a documentary series about it. And there's killing fields, what they call quote unquote killing fields in other countries as well. But yeah. I guess
there was a huge one. Where's that huge one at? It's like Cambodia or something.
I don't even know. Let me look.
Was it an Asian country?
No, I believe it was an African. Cambodian. You were right.
Cambodian.
What do you know? Give this man a sticker.
Someone give me a fucking good job sticker, please.
You want a cookie?
So what? No, you know what? You're the one that told
I just
me.
got the dog's attention real quick.
For a cookie. You're the one that told me about that. So we get lost in the research sometimes. It's a lot and it's every week, so it's pretty quick. We're not necessarily. I'm not an expert on this. Jill knows a lot.
Well, we're trying to focus on the ones that aren't talked about as much. I know nearly everything about Dahmer and Gacy and Ed Kemper and
right.
Those are second nature to me. I can pull facts out of my ass about them all day long. So we're trying to get out of that comfort zone where we talk about the ones that people don't talk about all the time.
And not only that, but this is a huge deal. This is the Texas Killing Fields. This is right in our backyard, as I'll say 100 more times throughout our podcasting journeys. But it's right here. I've never heard of it, honestly, before this. I didn't know that this was a thing. I know I have family in Pasadena, and I remember, now that I think about it, I remember being at some of their houses when I was a kid and being like, oh, we're going to go to the store. And they're like, nah, you guys, it's not the best area for that. And and I wonder, were those conversations with me somehow related to what we're talking about right now,
Well, I mean,
it was in the 90s.
Born in the 90s, right?
Well, I was 89, yeah.
89.
So this was during the killings of the 90s is when I was there growing up at 7 years old, with my family and my mom, and then being like, yeah, you can't go to the store. When Crystal Baker disappeared, that's when it was,
Yeah, I think when you were talking about one of the girls that disappeared in the 90s, and you said she was 12, I was 11 at that time. So,
yep.
But I didn't live in Texas at that time.
Nope.
So I guess we're gonna go on to talk about Robert Ben Rhoades.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about this guy right here.
This is just kind of speculation on my part. I kind of connected the dots. Kind of. I don't know if he's relevant at all.
I like this though. We always have this tendency to kind of like put our own thoughts towards it and be like, oh, is this a viable theory? What do you guys think? Holler back with some feedback if you guys have some of your own theories. We'd love to hear them.
I mean, I just kind of came across him in my research on the killing fields and decided I was going to do my own portion on on this guy just because it's relevant to me, and I thought it would be entertaining to listen to. It's a pretty interesting case. Robert Ben Rhoades was also known as the truck stop killer.
I think I've heard that before. The truck stop killer.
Yep.
Is this is in the same area, right? As Houston, that area?
Yeah, he lived in Houston for a time. I looked and looked and looked and could not find when he lived in Houston.
I could not find his address. I wanted to send him a postcard, Jill, but I swear to God, I looked everywhere and I could not find it.
Well, I have his current address.
Shit.
So.
Jill does a lot of research, guys. All right.
But I have a shit memory, so I'm going to try my best to make it not sound like I'm reading it from a script.
Yeah. No, I don't see any papers in your hands or anything.
No, I mean, here I am just free and clear.
They're going to hear it. They're going to know what you're doing.
Just flying by the seat of my pants here. All right, so.
We need one of those presidential podiums that like tells us what to fucking say. You know what I mean?
A teleprompter?
I like presidential podium. Fuck you guys. I think
that's what they stand at while they read the teleprompter.
You know what,
it's
guys?
It's a desk, yo.
All right. Well, we don't have any of that, all right? Maybe in the future.
Plastic picnic tables doing just fine.
We're on Patreon. Come see us on Patreon, and we'll get some teleprompters.
Yeah. The better we do, the better we do.
There it is.
There it is.
All right, so let's move on. Without further ado, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Robert Ben Rhoades, the truck stop killer. He was a long-haul trucker from Houston, Texas. He was born in 1945, November 22nd of 1945, in Council Bluffs, Iowa.
JFK, just saying.
This dude was quite the looker. He had, Google a picture of him. He had a...
Seriously?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
He's super cute. With a gaunt, sunken face, a crooked snarl, and a permanent squinted eye.
He doesn't sound cute.
Those are my words. That's
like
my
Mr.
description.
Scrooge. Okay, give me the name. The full name?
Robert Ben Rhoades.
Ben Rhoades, okay. Oh, boy.
He's a cutie, isn't he?
Oh, boy. Okay, so
honestly,
he looks like fucking Popeye's grandpa.
He looks like a serial killer.
Caught.
He looks like an evil guy.
He looks like he's... Yeah.
He went by the nickname Whips and Chains.
That'll do it. That'll do it.
He undoubtedly gave himself, I'm sure. It does.
All right, so because I don't know much about this guy, I know that he was convicted.
Oh yeah.
So give me some info.
So he was known as Whips and Chains, and that doubled as his CB handle. So I mean, truck drivers just passing through, they'd be like, "Hey, this here's Teddy Bear," you know?
Yeah, of course. Right.
Come back, give me a Smokey report or however the fuck they talk now. This is Smokey and the Bandit straight up, or some country song. I don't know, but it's my example, so poo on you. So can you just imagine somebody? There's Whips and Chains here. Oh, is there anybody else out there?
Is anyone else out there available? It's Whips and Chains. I'm here all night.
Is there a candy cane? I'd have been like, nope.
Oh God.
Let's see. His MO was that he picked up hitchhikers, he would rape and torture them. His method of dispatch was typically ligature strangulation or shooting with low caliber weapon.
Okay. Let me pause you there for a quick second. Some of the victims were found to be shot with a .22 caliber weapon, right? So
yeah, I mean,
doesn't get much lower than that as far as calibers go.
Well, I got me a 9 in the house, so calm down.
22 is smaller, Jill.
I'm just joking.
Okay.
It's a smaller number.
It's a smaller number. It's
got me a 4 from
.9 and .22. 22 is bigger, all right.
I got one of those guns you got to start up and let it run for a few minutes before you use it.
Sounds like an illegal bump stock.
Yeah. So he typically killed his victims with strangulation, ligature strangulation. So he used like a nylon pantyhose or a rope or shoelaces.
Wait, what's ligature strangulation?
Well, manual strangulation is like you use your hands, and ligature strangulation is like you use like a cord or a rope or.
Oh, my dumbass thought it meant you only strangled ligaments. I was like, well, it ain't gonna work, killer. Like, she's gonna have a blue arm, but you know what I mean. She can fight back with the other one.
Oh my. Let's see. Tucson officials were quoted saying that they believed by the early 1990s, Rhoades was kidnapping, torturing, and killing as many as 3 women per month.
In Tucson?
He was a long haul
he's a
truck
trucker.
driver.
Okay.
So he went through, Arizona all the way to Iowa and, Utah. He was all over the place. He kept a driving journal or a truck log or whatever.
Sounds like a Post Malone tour.
Sounds like his was about as successful, I would say.
Shit, girl.
Nah, just playing. So, he went all over the place. There's dozens and dozens of unsolved murders along his route, and his truck log proves that he was in the area for these.
No shit. Okay.
Yeah.
Suspicious. If you look at this guy, seriously, guys, pause our podcast and get online and Google a picture of this dude. You will shit yourself. He looks like fucking Popeye. I swear to God, without the spinach.
Yeah.
But apparently, still strong enough to. Well, never mind. Let's move on.
So officials reported. They said that he was killing. They believed he was killing up to 3 women per month, and his reign of terror spanned from the 70s to the 90s.
Would he take a week off? A month?
I guess.
Going fishing Saturdays for the boys.
From what I read, though, he kept his victims usually up to 2 weeks each one.
See, that's inconsistent with what I've read. Because a lot of these girls were found hours later.
Right.
But some of them weren't found for years.
True.
A year and a half or so.
He was brought to Texas to face charges in the slaying of 2 hitchhikers whom he picked up near El Paso. Douglas Ziskowski.
In the military, and for those of you who don't know, I was in the Marines, so if that makes you listen for a couple extra episodes, I'd appreciate it. Anyone with a name like that, we just call ski.
Ski?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, like, that's a super Polish name, right?
Yeah, anything like Lebowski, Ronofsky, Shefsky,
Watusi?
Watuski. Anything is just ski.
All right.
Smith is Smitty. Things like that.
All right, then.
Lang is bitch. I'm just kidding.
Where I'm from, it is. No.
Well, damn. Let's take that microphone away from you, girl.
So, Douglas and his new bride, I found the name Patricia Walsh.
Mm-hmm.
But also, in some articles, they have her named as Candace Walsh.
I saw Patricia Walsh. That's what the conviction was from, right? Was that instance?
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, they found her body, I believe, 13 years after her death.
13 years? Wow, that's some fucking police work for your ass.
Well, they identified it 13 years later.
Can you imagine having to wait that long?
I got nothing.
I got nothing.
They found Douglas pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah, Dougs are funny.
Doug funny?
Clever, right? Clever, right? Guys, come on.
Just blew my mind, man.
Dougs are funny, They really are, dude. And honestly, man, if
Patricia's or mayonnaise, if you want to get down to it.
I mean, if you really want to, dude, this guy just skeetered on by and fucking murdered everyone. I don't know. Jesus, he needs to calm down and go get some fucking pork chops.
We just went full-blown Nickelodeon on this shit.
Jesus Christ.
You took my pork chop joke.
Fuck. I apologize.
So Douglas's remains were discovered later that year by deer hunters in Utah. He wasn't identified until 2 years later. Patricia's remains weren't identified until 13 years later with the help of dental records.
God, that's unbelievable.
Yeah. It was believed that after killing Douglas, Rhoades had kept Patricia later with him, alive for as long as 2 weeks before killing and dumping her body.
Wow.
A month after Walsh's death, Rhoades abducted an 18-year-old unidentified drifter who claimed that Rhoades had kept her locked in the cab of his truck for 2 weeks and subjected her to torture and rape throughout.
She survived.
Yeah, she escaped. He didn't close the handcuffs all the way, and she saw an opportunity and she took off running.
If only I strangled more than her arm.
She reported the crimes to the police, and officers were actually able to bring Rhoades in for questioning. However, when she saw him in the police station, she lost her mind. She freaked out completely. She panicked, and she refused to press charges. She was afraid that she wouldn't be believed despite the overwhelming evidence against him.
He probably just looked at her.
Well, she was worried that he would be released and she'd be unprotected, and he'd find her and finish the job.
Yeah.
Can't say as I blame her.
No, I know. I mean, yeah, that's a tough situation for anyone.
Probably the most famous killing he's known for is the murder of 14-year-old Regina Walters.
Yeah, I've heard the name.
Yeah, that's a very famous picture of her. He had a habit of taking photos of his victims before killing them.
Really?
Yeah, and Regina was picked up with another young runaway named Ricky Lee Jones. It was her boyfriend. I believe he was 18 years old. She was 14. Rhoades killed Jones shortly after the abduction in Illinois. His body has still not been recovered to this day. There's a famous photo of Regina found amongst Rhoades' possessions. In the photo, Regina is seen wearing a knee-length black dress and patent leather heels. Yeah. Her hair has been shaved or cut off, and she has a terrified look on her face. Her hands are up in a position that looks like she's trying to protect herself from an attack. Yeah. It's if you look at the picture, you can read the words on her face. Like, she's just like, please don't, and puts her hands up, you know?
Yeah. I'm looking at it right now. It's absolutely bone-chilling.
She was strangled with baling wire and left to decompose in the barn where the photograph was taken.
I was going to say, it looks like it's nearby. It looks like an old barn, pieces of wood are rotting and falling all around her. And
yeah, I mean,
she does not look well. I'll tell you that much.
No, he'd had her for weeks at that point. Yeah. He shaved her entire body. He pierced her with fishing hooks. He implemented all kinds of torture. She was a 14-year-old kid. It's unbelievable. And then he left her in the rafters of that barn, and the owner of the barn came by to, I think they were talking about clearing the land, and they were going to burn this barn down, and he checked it just to make sure there was nothing in it, and he found the body. Wow. So she was strangled with baling wire and left in this barn. On April 1st of 1990, Rhoades was arrested on the side of I-40, 50 miles north of Phoenix. He was sitting on the side of the road in his rig, and a state trooper pulled up behind him to see if he needed help and to advise him to move his truck because he thought he was parked dangerously. The trooper was
regular stop.
Right. He stopped to talk to the guy. He stood up on the step and he glanced into the bed of the truck, and he discovered a woman inside, handcuffed. I believe she only had socks on. Wow. Or shoes or something. She was naked, handcuffed to the back of the seat. She was alive, but she had a horse bridle wrapped around her neck, and the bit of the bridle was in her mouth.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So he was absolutely in the middle of some shit.
Yeah. She was suffering from like all kinds of abrasions, cuts and bruises, welts on her body. She had whip marks up and down her chest and her back. Rhoades tried to pass it off as consensual, like he had picked her up and that was what they were into, and hey, I'm whips and chains, everybody, this is my fun times. And yeah, she obviously disputed that immediately.
She was like, get me the fuck out of here, first of all.
Yeah, she denied being a willing participant. But while he had her in captive, the woman told the police that he had confessed to her that he had been picking up women, torturing and killing them for at least 15 years.
15 years, wow.
He had a briefcase in his possession that was filled with handcuffs, alligator clips, leashes, whips, and various sex toys. Wow. He subjected all of his victims to all kinds of manners of torture. He would pierce their genitals with pins and needles. He would puncture their bodies with fishing hooks, rape, whip, and beat his victims from head to toe. He'd shave off all of their hair, all over their body and their heads. And many other methods of torture and humiliation. He often documented all of his tortures with photographs. So after this,
interesting.
Yeah, they searched his apartment, and after they searched his apartment, they revealed women's clothes strewn about the entire apartment, a white towel soaked in blood, many women's possessions, photographs of Regina Walters in various stages of undress, and several different periods of torture. They found Regina Walters' journal. Get this shit. They found Regina Walters' journal. Inside of the journal was her parents' phone numbers. Okay? Wow. Rhoades used her journal and those phone numbers to call and taunt her father at work and at home. So after he killed her... Afterwards, he found those phone numbers. He called her dad at work and said, you know, she's in Illinois. I shaved her hair, and when the father would ask, "Is she alive? Is she alive?" he would hang up. Inside of
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, inside of the journal, he had scrawled messages including Ricky is a dead man or Ricky is dead meat. It was in Rhoades' handwriting, with drops of blood all over the pages. Presumably, he was referring to Regina Walters' boyfriend that she was picked up with and he killed pretty immediately afterwards.
Wow.
So he had gone into her journal and written in his own handwriting, like, Ricky's dead, Ricky's dead meat, and there was blood all over the papers.
That's absolutely bone-chilling.
Yeah, that's pretty creepy. I think Rhoades could be, they speculate that Rhoades could be responsible for as many as 50 murders or even more. Some believe his death toll could be in the hundreds. According to his trucking records, Rhoades regularly traversed in 22 different states in his career. Although he was tried and convicted of only 3 victims, it's highly likely that he's responsible for many more unsolved murders along the highways.
It's got to be, right?
Yeah.
It's someone like that doesn't stop.
Rhoades was taken into custody and given the sentence of life without parole. He was transferred to Ozona, Texas to face charges on the slayings of the 2 hitchhikers. Mm-hmm. He had picked up 2 hitchhikers near El Paso, Douglas and Candace, or Patricia. So could he be responsible for any of these bodies found in the Texas killing fields? That's my question. I think that's plausible. He was active between the 70s and the 90s. Some of these girls were killed with ligature strangulation. They were killed with a low caliber weapon.
Yeah.
He had a low caliber weapon.
Totally matches.
Some of the victims the victims that he was convicted of were killed with a low caliber handgun, I believe.
The thing that gets me is the time frame. And I guess the routes. It just makes too much sense, It's everyone's like transient workers. That's what he is.
Well, he picked up Regina in Pasadena. Regina and Ricky. Okay, Pasadena is 26 miles from League City.
And that's makes it sound longer than it really is.
It's nothing to a truck driver who spends hours and hours.
Not only that, but it's all basically the same city. That whole area. Galveston's kind of separate, but that whole area of League City, Pasadena, you know what I mean? It's all kind of the same area. Right. So that totally makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. That there's so many unsolved murders out there, and they attribute him to sometimes some people say hundreds of victims. He's only been convicted of 3.
I wish we could just know, be like, how many people did you kill? For real.
Hope in my heart of hearts that when we die, whatever happens after that, they answer all my fucking murder questions. Like, gotta know. Like, no shit. When they find the body,
floating up with the angels, all of a sudden, embodied with all the knowledge of human existence.
Jesus, I gotta know. Like,
not are aliens real, but actually killed.
I plan on being there in heaven for a long time, so we have time to go over all this shit.
We're gonna start a podcast in heaven.
I'll know who Jack the Ripper is. Bet money. I'll find out. I'll go back into the
I think it was that. We'll have another episode about that, of course. But if you listen to our first episode, we appreciate it first of all because we know it's a little rough. But also,
this is amateur hour for sure.
Amateur hour for now, but we're only going to get better. You know what? You know what it is, Jill? It's patience and persistence, and that's true of anything in life. If you want to be a freaking gymnast, patience and persistence. If you want to be a perfect serial killer, patience and persistence. If you want to be a podcast success, patience and persistence. You know what I mean?
We'll see. We'll see if that theory holds water. But I do have good news.
What?
Robert Rhoades is currently 74 years old and living out the rest of his shitty, pathetic life in Menard Correctional Facility in Randolph County, Illinois.
No
kidding.
And
I hope like hell that every morning before breakfast he gets ramrodded with a fucking broomstick.
I'm sure he does.
And that his life is a miserable piece of shit. Just like he is.
I think so. And it's very possible. So you think that, ultimately, look at my list here. Let's compare our research, which we always do, but I want Jill to look at this specifically. These are the killers, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Tell me he fits that profile for the 80s right there in the middle. Because, that's the actual killing fields, and I feel like it just makes so much sense, So
he's got three victims that he's been convicted of their slayings,
right?
At least, which I don't understand that because Ricky, you know what I mean? He would make 4, but his youngest victim that we know of is Regina Walters. she was 14 years old.
Right.
And then the newlyweds that he killed, they were in their 20s, maybe their early mid 20s, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah, and that makes sense, dude.
it could fit. I mean,
Because Jane and Janet are 25 and 31. Jane and Janet Doe in the actual killing fields. And then what are the other ages? We have 2 other people that were found there.
16, 23, 25, and 31.
I mean, and truthfully, they're all found together, so we know it's the same person. It makes a lot of sense. And, you know, part of me wants to think about, like, is there a network of serial killers that talk to each other? Are there people that...
Probably on the dark net somewhere.
You know what I mean? Like some type of, they're like, look, we can do it here. We can dump our bodies here. No one's ever going to find us.
I mean...
If anyone questions us, we can say this. Is there any type of something greater that we're not looking at? You know what I mean?
So there's a cannibal killer. I'm not sure the names of the story because that's not what we're on right now. But he went on to a chat room, a website, and found a guy who wanted to die and wanted somebody to cannibalize him. So this guy went on there and posted a fucking personal ad saying, "Hey, I need somebody."
Craigslist cannibals.
Like, I want to eat somebody, and this guy was like, "Yeah, I'm down. Let's do this." You know, and he came over there, and the guy changed his mind halfway through, and so he was like, "All right, I'll take you to the train station. No sweat," you know. And then as they were about to leave, he goes, "Never mind, fuck it, I want to do this." So he put him in the fucking bathtub and cut his throat, he cut a
Wait, who said they want to do this? The guy that was going to get killed?
The guy that was going to get killed was like, "Never mind, I do want to do this after all." And so
he's like, "Yeah, let's just kill me, dude."
And get this shit, the guy actually tasted himself. Like, as he was cutting pieces of him off, he was feeding it to both of them.
He was still alive.
What the fuck? Yeah. So, yeah, I think... And nobody knew what the fuck was going on until much later when this guy disappeared and you know, nobody knew where he went.
He didn't tell his friends. He's like, "Hey guys, on Thursday I'm gonna go ahead and get eaten.
Yeah,
So let's make plans for Wednesday and not Friday."
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, fuck.
Yeah, if there's any parting wisdom you have for me, maybe we'll have like a what's the word I'm looking for?
You think that's a sexual thing?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like they're like eating each other with boners and shit or whatever. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Eat this dick. Nah, but for real.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's probably
That's
a
nuts.
power thing, and
Yeah.
the power thing leads to like a gratification thing, and
Yeah.
you know, so
The psychology of it is so interesting to me of because I mean, not being a serial killer, I look at it and I'm like,
that seems like the easier way to go, and you know,
it's just so intriguing to me that these people's brains work in certain ways that it's like a switch. It's like they can't control it. They can't stop. It's like alcoholism or addiction, you know? It's like that killing is the drug of their choice. And it fucking intrigues me. And I think it intrigues you guys, all of our listeners, and that's why you're listening. You know, it's just it's an incredible anomaly in society, right? So I don't know what's up with these guys. I can't imagine what would drive somebody to eat another person or to strangle a girl in order to get off. You know what I mean? Like,
well, even the specifics about it, like Robert Rhoades. I mean,
Robert Redford.
What was his compulsion to Robert? You're a very fine actor. Please. I mean, what was his compulsion to shave their hair off? Where did that come from? What in his life made him decide that's, you know, he could have done all the other stuff he did and not done that part.
I want my bitches to look like chemo.
Like, well, I mean, it looks like a...
I don't know. I think maybe it's probably a cleanliness thing at that point. It's some type of, you know...
I think it's just a ritual. I think...
You need to be clean in order to be...
Well, there's just so many things that they do that aren't explained until you look at their past, kind of thing.
I wish they would just admit it. It's like, dude, you're going to die in prison. Just tell us. Like, you're not going to get in any more trouble. Like...
Yeah, well, I mean, for instance, it's a lot of symbolism, even if they don't realize it while they're doing it. But like Edmund Kemper, for instance, put his mother's vocal cords in the garbage disposal. Like, how symbolic is that shit? He's like, and
what?
he couldn't get him to go down, or they clogged up or something.
Right,
and he goes, even dead, you're still a pain in my fucking ass. Or like, even you can't.
Oh my God.
Even what did he say? Even after.
We'll have to do an episode on him for sure.
Oh yeah, he's my favorite. I know that sounds creepy and weird.
No,
and
you're on a murder podcast, Jill. Talk to us. I mean, what's up? That's fine.
He fascinates me, and he's a genius. I mean,
Oh, Eddie Kempies.
They couldn't believe the results of his IQ test. They had to redo it.
Yeah, it's like...
I think he set a record and then broke his own record the next time he tried.
Jill, and I'm so sorry, guys, but Jill is actually married. She's not single, and her husband has a really high IQ, too. Who also happens to be my brother, but I don't share that.
And not a serial killer.
I don't share that gift with him.
Which gift?
The IQ.
The marriage?
Well, edit. But also, yes. God damn it. I meant the IQ, you dick.
Yeah, well.
Whatever, it'll free up more time for our podcast. Anyways.
Yeah, I mean, that's Robert Shitty Ben Rhoades.
Robert Shitty Ben Rhoades. Ultimately, a very strong possibility for a suspect in the 1980 murders, I think. I personally believe that the murders in the 1970s was Mr. Bell. I think he did it. He was like, hey, guys.
Guess what? I did this thing.
I killed all those bitches. And they're like.
Tell us how. Prove it. We want to see.
And he's like, dude, I'm already in prison. Like, what do you want me to do? And then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really. But of course, there's been killers out there that admit to crimes they didn't do just for the notoriety.
Yeah, but I mean, and I've thought about that with this guy. I said, what is his motive to say that if he was innocent? I mean, he was already doing, like he was already being arrested for shit. Like he was jacking off in front of girls. He was flashing himself.
How long was his sentence for?
70 years, I think.
70 years.
At 65 years old.
So who was that guy, that killer? There was a...
H.H. Holmes.
No.
No, I don't know. We'll talk about that guy as well. Originally, that was going to be our first episode, but then we decided to get all Texan on these motherfuckers like a blue bonnet. Blue bell, bitch.
This is the Longhorn Network.
Mm-hmm. I remember Dave Crockett went down there to the damn Alamo, San Antonio.
Remember the Alamo. All right, well, so, in conclusion, Robert Rhoades, piece of shit.
Well, no, here's what I want to say. In conclusion, I think there were at least 3 killers. I think there was Mr. Bell of the 1970s to 77. I think that there was maybe the guy that you're talking about. Maybe not. I don't know. There was definitely an unknown killer in the 1980s that left the bodies in the fields, right? And ultimately, there was the killer in the 1990s who was caught, William Lewis Reese, at 58 years old. So I think that we're looking at least 3 killers here, maybe more. There's a couple onesies and twosies I don't think are related, but we are approaching the end of our time limit here, just past an hour here. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap up with that. I mean, I think we have 3 killers, like I said, 70s, 80s, and 90s, with the 80s remaining unsolved. If any of you have any information on this, feel free to hit us up on our Facebook, on our website. So it's all just The Grave Matter, Facebook, Instagram, and our website, thegravematter.com. We're working on getting a Patreon soon, so you guys can help us out a little bit, and hopefully we can keep doing this and improving and getting it to you. As well as find us on Apple and Google Play and Stitcher. We're working on a few other avenues as well. So we're growing. We're getting there. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, very much so. And join us next week as we continue our journey with the Corals. We're going to be talking about Carl Eugene Watts and Dean Coral, who might take up 2 episodes because it's just so much information. So we appreciate you guys very much, and we'll see you soon, huh?
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
See you next week.
Take care.